Star Wars Jedi Fallen Order is an action RPG developed by Respawn Entertainment and published by Electronic Arts. Respawn has a fantastic pedigree and is also responsible for one of my favorite games of all time, Titanfall 2, so I know they're capable of high quality gamecraft. I can say I had fairly high expectations coming into this playthrough. I typically strive to avoid in-depth gameplay and spoilers, so I was unsure what awaited me, as I came in mostly blind. So after completely finishing the game, I'd say this is an entertaining dive into the Star Wars universe and yet another chapter, and a departure from the power trips that came before it. It's a refreshing take as we control a young Jedi in the making who's trying to find his way and understand what's really at stake if the Empire has theirs. This is a great starting point to big storytelling now, and hopefully, even bigger storytelling in the future. Several game mechanics are pulled from different genres and melded into a system that works well in this slice of space action and drama. Respawn isn't attempting to break the mold or reinvent the wheel, only borrow and adapt for more compelling gameplay. I won't go as far as to say there are no original ideas, but they definitely draw heavily from other successful genres, and what they built works. Jedi Fallen Order in a nutshell ultimately plays like Dark Souls Light, and that's not necessarily a bad thing. You play as the character known as Cal Kestis, a former Jedi Order Padawan who finds himself suddenly thrown into a dangerous world due to a past he has all but forgotten. He must suddenly unravel the mysteries of the Jedi, avoid the grasp of the Inquisition who hunt him, come to terms with lost memories, and ultimately rebuke the Empire's evil plans. Cal is joined in his campaign by Seer, a former Jedi Knight and my favorite character in the game, and Grease, the pilot of the Mantis, the ship that pilots you through the galaxy. Cal begins his pilgrimage with his newly assembled and unproven team to a future that is unknown and riddled with danger. So Cal starts off at a fairly average power level and isn't insanely OP. He's like the warm porridge that has the temperature just right. Overall, he feels really well balanced, as you don't find yourself crushing every enemy like a soda can or force choking them into oblivion from the start, although the option in a later game would have been welcome. Enemies will bum rush you and beat you down if you aren't quick to react. Cal relies on his lightsaber and force abilities to combat his enemies and traverse each of the different planets' terrain. There are many options in how to approach fights, and you will need to be as focused on defense as you are on offense. The lightsaber feels good, as you can one or two shot most enemies. Combos are fairly simple and require little more than pressing the attack button 3 or 4 times consecutively. You won't have to memorize vast button strings like Tekken or juggle enemies for style points like Devil May Cry. You simply plan out your attacks a few moves at a time. To make it more interesting, about half the enemies you'll face have energy-based weapons that they can block and attack with. Block being the key word there. This implementation negates some of the power of the lightsaber in an excellent manner that keeps the combat fresh and from becoming stale and monotonous. The fights are more of a duel than a saloon brawl, and you'll need to strategize to get ahead as enemies have a total disregard for their own safety and choose violence on sight. Also, be prepared to parry incoming enemy attacks, as that is the bread and butter of the combat system, similar to Sekiro, but much less punishing. The parry timing is based on the difficulty you select, so if you were to play in story mode, the parry window would be rather large and much less acute than if you were to play on Jedi Master, which is a much harder difficulty. This allows for players to adjust the game difficulty to a level they will be comfortable with, and those seeking a challenge can crank it up to meet the desired outcome. You can also roll to avoid damage, and at times you will need to, rather than parry, due to enemies having unblockable attacks. So rolling to avoid damage or to get better distancing from a group of enemies is often necessary, and yet another tool at your disposal. The Force is also fairly simple to use, and only a handful of abilities will make it into your repertoire. As you grow in power, these abilities will gain in potency as well, to include increasing the amount of time you can slow an enemy, to adding to the number of enemies you can slow at once. You're never really given an Ultra Instinct-like ability, like shooting lightning out of your fingertips or the aforementioned force crushing of enemies, which would have been awesome, but I understand that Cal is simply not at that level of power yet. Maybe if they included an ultimate ability, it would have worked, but I like the consistency of the narrative around Cal's moveset, and it makes more sense given his circumstances. I would love to see where they go in the sequel that comes out in April this year, as there is so much potential for Cal going forward. Might we see him rise to the heights of a Jedi Master in the future? Or is there a dark side story waiting? There's also quite a bit of platforming throughout the campaign. The levels are designed to have several paths of traversal and are interconnected, But at some point, there's a requirement to climb, wall run, swing from a rope, jump, and even double jump to access new areas and progress. I would have preferred less platforming and more consistent action, but for what it is and how it's implemented, it works well. You will gain new abilities as you level up from defeating enemies and earn XP. Skill points are the required tender, and many of these abilities are required to progress in the campaign. For instance, you may need to force push a broken wall or force pull a ladder to progress to new areas. There's also a fair amount of backtracking to revisit locales that you weren't able to access before you had these new abilities, so be prepared to see old areas several times. I don't think this is a drawback per se, but considering the size and scope of the Star Wars universe, I would have liked to see a larger variety of planets to visit, or just have the original zones opened up to a more sandbox style of gameplay. Moving to new areas would have been even better than backtracking as much, but it's not overly done to where it ruins the experience at all. It just seems like more of a afterthought than anything. There are also meditation circles for saving, resting, and accessing the skill tree to spend skill points. These act as bonfires from Dark Souls, so you'll be able to have your health and healing items, which in this game are called stim packs, refilled, and all enemies you've defeated will also respawn. They're quite generous with the amount of meditation circles and their placements, as I never felt desperate to find one and hanging on to the little life I had near death. Typically, I was able to get to a meditation circle and good health. The world building in this game is excellent. The Star Wars IP gives the developers access to literally decades worth of lore and design philosophy to pull from and build on. Star Wars has such a distinct style and art direction that you can instantly tell if something is even remotely related. Jedi Fallen Order wears its colors proudly on its sleeve, and it's easily recognized as another leg in the universe. You will visit multiple planets with varying landscapes and terrain, some of which may feel familiar to some, while others are new, but all uniquely Star Wars. The scale of the zones you will battle through are huge, but unfortunately you rarely get to truly explore the vastness that awaits you. I very regularly felt like I was only given a tiny slice of the whole, and was left feeling boxed in and gated off, and not in a come back later with a new ability kind of way. The vistas in the distance yearn for exploration, and the exclusion of any NPCs or separate storylines as you explore was a missed opportunity in my opinion. Characters' clothing has a futuristic space vibe, but also seems like everyday attire, matching the explorer monk-like themes of different characters. Blasters and other trooper weapons shoot familiar red bolts and sound great. You'll recognize droids and ships and the industrial style of the Empire. The ship scrapper starting area is alive and bustling with space traffic as you see small and large ships coming and going. Overall, the game world is stunning and carries the mystique that the Star Wars brand is known for. The environments themselves hide minute details everywhere, from different shades of stone and walls to vines that sprawl the entire length of a tree. Animals will scurry away into holes in the ground when you get close as ships scream by overhead. My favorite areas to explore were the tombs and crypts, as they tell their story in silence. It's all in the details of describing in the walls and ancient look of the statues. I spent a lot of time just slowly panning the camera around these areas to take all of the wonderful elements in. To me, this is where the high points of the world design lie, in the intimate spaces that force you to focus on the finite details in this compact area. But this is also one of the drawbacks. If only we could have had more interaction with others along the way, as the isolation runs for pretty much the entirety of the game. You do have a couple missions assisting other characters, but you only interact with them a short amount of time, and it's always in a linear manner, as there is never a random encounter with choices for players to make and how they choose to progress. The character design is solid. I really like that Cal is just an average guy trying to find his way in the world. He is of average height and build, not really overconfident, and certainly unsure of what's to come. I still get a kick out of his run animation, but it adds character. He has a great blank canvas to paint a story on. Cere and Grease make fantastic companions. Grease has a unique forearm design, and Cere is amazingly voice acted by Deborah Wilson, who is no stranger to film and television, and I especially enjoyed her on Mad TV back in the day. She steals the show with her passionate performance and intensity, as you can feel all of her fear, anger, and uncertainty. The motion capture is also amazing, as it details the shifting of the eyes, pursing of the lips, and furrowing of the brow. If you were to mute the game, you could still just as easily tell which direction the conversation is heading just by watching their facial expressions. The main villain of the game, the second sister, is awesome. Her voice acting is tight and concise, and she has a haunting way of presenting herself, which plays well into being the boogeyman, or in this case, woman, to the Jedi. When she speaks, it's always with a tone of dread and despair, and I love it. Enemies come in a fairly familiar variety. You will definitely recognize most of the Empire's troops and androids. I'd say the monster and creature types could have been expanded upon, as you tend to be out in open environments most of the time, and when you're not fighting stormtroopers, you're often battling the same creatures in their natural habitats. I would have also liked to see a larger variety of boss battles as well, as I was surprised there were so few. However few the boss fights were, though, they were still pretty much enjoyable. But it would have been nice to see maybe some expanded mechanics that the bosses actually perform. So overall, in the performance, I ended up playing this game on a PS5 in performance mode. The game renders in 1440p at 60 frames a second. And overall, the game ran smooth, frames never dipped, and aside from the occasional glitch, performed well. Graphically, it's an appealing looking game, especially considering it was originally released on PS4 and Xbox One. Images are sharp and textures don't appear muddy or low res. The art direction adds to the clean look overall. The color palette does appear to be a slight bit muted, but there are punchy pops of color when needed, and it helps to contrast well, as most of the color tones are earthy and feel organic. Unfortunately, there are cons, as there is with usually any game, and in this case, there's a lot of glitches that occur related to enemy AI pathing and environmental clipping. Enemies would sometimes get stuck on the environment like doors or boxes. They would also have issues pathing to you and reset combat at odd times, leaving themselves open to free attacks. In one case, 2 enemies got stuck in the blast doors instead of going through the opening in the center. They just decided to walk forward and get stuck in the door, at times clipping through partially. Other times, enemies seem to get stuck on nothing as the animations just bug out. This doesn't happen often enough to be a problem, but it did happen several times throughout my time playing, and mostly detracts from the gameplay if anything. It is disappointing to see a game that has been out since 2019 still have glitches of this kind in 2023, especially coming from a AAA studio. This is also the enhanced version, but it seems like these issues still have gone unchanged all this time. So is this game fun or not? In the end, this game is fun and a great entry into the plethora of Star Wars games that came before it. I love the hero and villain characters and thoroughly enjoyed my just over roughly 20 hours of playing time. The game never overstayed its welcome and also left the door open for the upcoming much anticipated sequel. There were several cinematic moments that felt right at home in a big budget film. They never played out for too long, and most of the time you were controlling your character throughout the length of it. The scale of these moments at times is downright impressive and worth experiencing. Sometimes the story did get a little flat from around the midpoint until toward the end of the campaign, but the last quarter or so hooked me, and I was invested in the outcome. The finale was epic, and I had goosebumps in the final moments, and you'll know the moment when you see it. Respawn definitely delivered, and I highly recommend Jedi Fallen Order to anyone who is a fan of action RPGs, Souls-likes, Metroidvanias, sci-fi or fantasy games, or of course the Star Wars IP. I'm pretty sure you won't be disappointed and will get a good amount of enjoyment out of the game. And that's it. That's my overview of the game and my thoughts. Thank you for spending this time with me, and I appreciate all the support, and I will see you guys in the next video. Peace.